Good afternoon, my beautiful babes and babettes. I am your resident active advocate. The sun is shining, I'm wearing a t-shirt, and I get to talk today to you about Finding Nemo, which means I get to talk about turtles! No, actually, that's not really the point of this video. The point of this video is to talk about fish, specifically marlin, specifically a clownfish named Marlin, because that's how she do. All right, so you have all, and your grandmothers have all seen this movie. I think you know what happens in the first 10 minutes, because every Pixar film has to rip your heart out within the first 10 minutes. All right, so Finding Nemo is about a family of clownfish, and Marlin and Coral have just laid several, droves of eggs. So they are new parents, and it's like, oh, we'll name this half Marlin Jr. and this half Coral Jr., right? And she says to him, no, I kind of like the name Nemo, right? And he's like, okay, we can name at least one of them Nemo. Right. So, unfortunately, spoilers! Within the first 10 minutes of this movie, a barracuda comes and eats both Coral and the vast majority of her eggs. At this point in the video, I would like to give a shout out to a channel called Cinema Therapy, who does an excellent rundown of Marlin's psyche throughout this movie. They don't need exposure nearly as much as I do, but I'm a good person and they put out good content. So I highly recommend you go and watch Cinema Therapy's video on this movie. Because they do a better job than I could ever do, really. But Marlin sees the last surviving egg, names him Nemo, and says, I will never let anything happen to you. Nemo is damaged in the barracuda attack. He is born with what his father calls his lucky fin. It's a shrunken fin, just because his egg was damaged. But that doesn't play as much into the story as you would think. There are instances where it may slow him down, but other than that, Nemo, as I say, is not the character I want to talk about in this video. I want to focus most on Marlin, who was the proud father of many droves of children reduced to one. And from that highly traumatic incident, that and losing his wife, he gained PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. When he says to Neo, I will never let anything happen to you, that is an expression of how deeply he cares for his son, how much he wants to protect him because of what just happened to the rest of his family. But at the same time, in the words of Jonathan Decker from Cinema Therapy, if you don't let anything happen to you, then nothing will ever happen to you. And that is pretty much the conceit of Nemo's childhood until his first day of school, because Marlin is what we would call a helicopter parent. He is way too overprotective, like very much so. Nemo gets himself stuck inside some kind of underwater plant, and, he doesn't know how to get himself out at all. Marlin is always there to save him from any little scrape, any teeniest scrape he could possibly get himself into, because Marlin does not want to see any harm come upon his son. It's perfectly understandable, and this happens in the real world too. When people suffer from PTSD, they can have frequent flashbacks, they can have awful mood disorders, they can sink into depression at times. It could even be a permanent, quote, setting for their brain that they could just lapse into depression and not be able to function either for a time or even permanently, depending on what happened to them. And no one, by the way, is weaker or stronger than anyone else when it comes to PTSD, because all of our brains are wired in a different way, so everyone is going to react even to the same form of stimulus in a different way. Let's say, for instance, that you have a very spur of the moment kind of life-saving operation that needs to be done. Let's say you, I don't know, go into heart failure or something along those lines, right? And you need to go to the hospital very quickly, very spur of the moment. Some people can wake up from that experience and come back and say, "Oh my, I'm alive. I feel incredible. This is the best I've ever felt. I'm so grateful to be here and alive and kicking." Others will absorb the same stimulus and go, "I almost died. Oh my gosh, I'm in peril. It could happen again at any minute." And even the person who says, "I'm so happy, I'm alive, this feels great," even the person who says that can go also into the mode of, "But when's it going to happen again?" That's the whole point of PTSD. Marlin does not want anything negative to happen to Nemo because of all the horrible trauma that Marlin suffered before Nemo was properly born. Remember, Nemo was still in the egg when this happened. He has no recollection whatsoever of his mother or of his potential siblings, none of whom had hatched either before the Barracuda attack. So when Nemo goes off to school, he makes friends of his own age whose parents are not overly protective, and they're going to swim off of the reef, and Marlin has tagged along with Nemo up to this point, and he says to his teacher, "It's not safe out there. I'm not letting my son go with you." And Nemo really wants to fit in with this new group because it's implied at least that he either doesn't have friends before this point or doesn't have many friends to whom he is close before this point, because it's always just been him and dad. That's another tendency of overbearing parenting, is that you can want to keep your child at your side at all times and not allow them to branch out into other relationships. So it could be implied that that's happened with Marlin and Nemo. And Nemo's only a child, so he doesn't know any better at this point, right? He doesn't know that he either can or should be or could be branching out and making other friends. But when he does, he really wants to fit in because, again, he's a young kid. So Marlin flat out tells him no. Nemo runs away from home. And before he does so, he says to Marlin, "I hate you." And that, I do not believe, is a proper expression of how Nemo really feels. Because by the end of the movie, I'm skipping ahead a lot, okay? But I will skip backwards a bit. By the end of the movie, Nemo has had so many adventures on his own and has been in so many different situations that put him in mortal peril that he realizes, "I do need my father, but my father also needs me." And that's kind of the whole point of why he was being overprotective of me. He needs me. He thinks, because PTSD again, Marlin thinks that Nemo needs him very desperately in order to stay alive, in order to stay safe. Really, though, the whole point is that Marlin needs Nemo. There has to be, and I do believe that this is true of any relationship, though, there has to be this kind of symbiosis, this give and take, this recognition of the fact that we both need each other. It may not have to be in a codependent way. It may not have to be, "I need to take care of you and I need you to take care of me." It doesn't necessarily have to have anything to do with take care of. It's simply a matter of being there for one another, to support one another. And if Marlin had ever made it clear to Nemo why he was so overbearingly protective, I'm sure that Nemo would have accepted it. But it's more than implied that Nemo does not know about the fate of his mother or his other siblings. They are never really brought up again, except towards the very, very end. Marlin says to Nemo, "I promised I would never let anything happen to you." But Nemo, by this point, has figured out, through meeting with other creatures in the sea, through surviving potentially deadly encounters, but also through doing things for himself, he has discovered that he doesn't need his father in his life. He wants his father in his life. There's a difference here. It's not this, what you would call, toxic relationship. It's not this codependency. where both parties cleave to the other because the one does not feel complete without the other. That's the whole idea behind codependency, and it's not a good way to go. I'm quoting cinema therapy here again, but the whole idea, this is a romantic relationship thing, but I think this can apply to any relationship. The whole idea of you complete me is a toxic frame of mind. One must be complete within themselves first in order to give to other people properly. I mean, this is even in the Bible. I'm not religious myself in that sense. I don't know who in my audience is, but it even says in the Bible, do not give to others until your own cup is overflowing. Give of your excess, not of your dearth, basically. So the whole idea is that we need to share with one another in order to better facilitate the growth of relationships. Cinema therapy, in going on from that, they say, you don't complete me, you supplement me, which sounds a lot less romantic, but that could, as I say, be put into any context. Sounds a lot less romantic, but it's also more realistic. I don't want this person in my life in order to complete my life. I want them in my life in order to supplement what I already have. Because I am complete unto myself. I must recognize that I am an independent unit. And that is the process through which both Marlin and Nemo need to go in this movie. Marlin needs to recognize that Nemo is going to be okay and doesn't need him there always to hover and to protect him. Nemo, conversely, needs to realize that Marlin is doing these things not for Nemo's protection necessarily, but for Marlin's own protection because he doesn't want to get scarred again. That's not necessarily how Marlin would see it, but it's implied by the narrative. And the whole idea of Nemo going out on his own, it was actually very good for him in the end, even though, like I say, multiple times it almost ended up killing him and almost ended up getting his father killed in search of him. There's one particular incident in the movie where it harkens back to the beginning, where Nemo got himself stuck inside a plant, tail first, and didn't know how to get out. But he's in this fish tank stuck in a pipe, and none of the other fish in the tank want to help him. It's not that they're not willing to, it's that their leader wants to see whether he can do this for himself. Because, there's definitely this sense about Nemo that he lacks independence, that he lacks capability, because he's never tried to reinforce it within himself. The first time Nemo tries to do something of that caliber independently, he gets it. This will not necessarily be true to life, okay? I want to put this down as a disclaimer. The whole point of trying is that you will fail the first time. And if we didn't accept that when we were babies, none of us would have learned to walk, for example. That's a bad example because there are people with mobility disabilities who aren't able to walk. But okay, let's have another example, like I don't know, drawing a circle, that kind of thing. If you try the first time and it looks more like a square, you know what to do the second time. Or for any given thing that you may attempt. You're going to try and you're going to fail the first time, but if you don't try again, you're not going to get any better. And that's what Nemo is very quick to realize. That and the fact that his environment around him at that point is saying, you must be independent or you will die. You will be in danger. So you need to smarten up, you need to grow up quickly. In real life, that's not necessarily, again, going to be the case because a lot of people who are in these codependent, I will call them codependent, parent-child relationships, when it comes to disability especially, it's going to be very difficult for both parties to break that bond, and it's not necessarily going to be a life or death situation that forces them to do so. So in real life, because we don't live in such a hostile environment as the ocean, it is probably more advisable not to leap off a cliff together, that kind of thing. It's a metaphor, okay? But do things gradually. You know, if you are finding that you're having a hard time letting go of your child who has a disability, or if you are a child with a disability and are having a hard time letting go of the parental aid or the aid of your caretaker that surrounds you, go slowly. Give yourself time, but give yourself permission to do what needs to be done. A lot of the issue that stands in the way of people gaining their independence is a mental block, not a physical one. So, the whole idea of finding Nemo, if he were allowed to take the situation more slowly, is that it's all up here in the mind for both Nemo and Marlin. All right, so that's Nemo and Marlin. I want to talk about Dory. She sort of acts, I'm not going to say she acts as a supplementary mother figure to Nemo because she doesn't, but she is the one who facilitates Marlin's growth away from the idea of my son needs me there right now all the time. Even though Dory goes with Marlin on his journey to find Nemo, as the title of the movie suggests, she is also the one who teaches him you have to let go. There's this mantra, this song that she sings to herself. Please don't copyright strike me, YouTube. Just keep swimming, just keep swimming, just keep swimming, right? And it's her whole philosophy of life. You have to keep moving forward because with her, she has problems with short-term memory loss, and that would be classified as an intellectual disability of some caliber. And Marlin doesn't find her particularly useful for much of the movie, but the idea is that because I cannot see backward, I must move forward. Marlin is stuck in the opposite conceit throughout most of the movie. Because I am stuck in the past, I can't move forward. So they have opposite trajectories. And Marlin is able to help Dory remember, but Dory is able to help Marlin. I'm sorry if this sounds cheesy, but she's able to help him to forget. Not necessarily to forget, but to move on. You know, because she has no choice but to move on because she can't remember the past, literally. So, that's the idea behind her character and how her actual cognitive disability does come into being of benefit both to herself, by the way, and to Marlin, because she is one of the most carefree characters in this movie until you get to Crush. I love Crush. And I just want to talk about Crush because he's a turtle, not because he fits necessarily into the disability narrative. But in some sense, he does, because when they are all together with the turtles, Marlin and Dory are together with the turtles, and the turtles are amazing surfer dude, go with the flow kind of characters. It's not just Dory anymore, it's also Crush specifically, but the turtles in general, who teach Marlin literally, in their case, but metaphorically as well, to go with the flow. And Crush has a little son, teeny little turtle, and he's adorable. And there's an instance where the son is separated from his father, and it looks like a dangerous situation. Marlin freaks out because he's afraid for the kid, who then swims right back into the picture, and he's fine. You know, and Crush says to Marlin, you have to let them figure it out for themselves. That is also simultaneously what Nemo is learning on his end of the story. So both father and son have to learn the same lesson, but for different reasons and in different ways. I really, really like this movie. I really like this movie. And the turtles are my spirit animals. Wait, is that cultural appropriation? Okay, I really like the turtles. He was like, whoa! And then she was like, whoa! And then you were like, whoa. And it's great. So that is Finding Nemo. I could potentially do Finding Dory, but that will be coming later. I would have to rewatch it because I don't remember it very well. Yeah, so that's a thing that could be happening. I have skipped, I realized, quite a number of movies, like all of the Toy Story movies for one thing, but quite a lot to do with Disney Pixar. And Pixar, as I say, is really good at ripping your heart out. So they're actually a very good studio when it comes to at least the passive disability narrative, if not the fully active one. This one was much more active, and we will see other rather active stories in the future from them, I'm sure, especially in regards to mental health, which is why Cinema Therapy, plugging them again, is very fond of that studio. Please go check out their work. They're a lot better than I am. All right, so that is my video for the day, and I don't know what we're talking about tomorrow, but we will figure that out together. And I'll see y'all tomorrow. Mwah!